All right. Last but not least, before we get started, I wanted to let all the listeners know that you guys can go to saltynerdpodcast.com. That takes you to our podcast directory, whichever platform that you use, whether it's Android and or Apple. You can go there, and we'd love it if you gave us a 5-star review. If you give us a 5-star review and comment your thoughts and just let us know what you're thinking about the podcast, we will send you some stickers as a little thank you for giving us that review. It always helps bring more eyes to the podcast, give us some reviews, give us some attention, and we can help bring more people on board to the Salty crew. That's saltynerdpodcast.com. You go there, give us a 5-star review, and you get something in the mail. Thank you guys very much. Moving on to my pick for this week's Monsters and Robots. I picked Monsters, which it's a guilty pleasure movie of mine. I understand that a lot of people don't like it. However, I enjoy the hell out of this movie. And it is Godzilla, 1998 with Matthew Broderick. And I don't know, man. I saw this movie when I was a kid, and I think it was right around the time I obviously love Jurassic Park, and this has a lot of ties to that dinosaur era, movies and stuff like that. And I loved it. I thought it was cool. I loved the effects. I liked the characters. I thought Matthew Broderick's character, the worm guy, I thought he was cool. He was funny. It had some Nick Tatopoulos.
That was the run. Yeah, I can't even say it. So.
Topolakova, whatever the guy's name is.
Baklava.
And I liked all the relationships with the characters. I fell in love with the adventure, and I thought it was really cool. And I thought the story itself was interesting. And I wasn't attached to the Godzilla franchise in any way, so I really didn't know that it went so far off of the rails when it came to following that, that classic Godzilla. I had no idea what that was. The real Godzilla from Japan. I was like, okay, yeah, it's just a monster. I didn't know that there was a whole, you have to follow these directions in order to make a Godzilla movie, and this just went the completely opposite direction. I didn't really realize that. So when I watched it, I just took it for a cool, interesting, fun, I thought it looked great monster movie. Running through the city, crashing through buildings, and digging holes in Madison Square Garden and stuff. I don't know. I fell in love with it, and that's why I picked it, because I feel like this movie needs to be defended by at least one person, and that's going to be me.
You're going to be its champion.
You hate Goonies, but you love Godzilla 98.
Yeah,
you make no sense.
There's no stupid freaking kids killing monsters in this movie. All right. Let's go around the table real quick. I gave you guys the reason why I picked this movie.
Aren't you going to set the stage?
Oh, sorry.
What's this movie about, Alex?
This movie is about, it's named Godzilla, but like I said before, it's not really in line with the classic Godzilla storyline. What happens is sometime in the late 50s, early 60s, I believe, the French-Polynesian nuclear tests had created a side effect.
Which all happened. That's based on
on real stuff. And I love the opening sequence to this movie. That's
the best part of the movie.
This is great. The music, the setup, where basically they're using these...
The best part of this movie was the end.
True.
when it finally happened.
So what happens is the French Polynesian nuclear tests have a side effect that these iguanas, these native iguanas to these islands out there, had become irradiated while still in the egg, and that caused them to grow abnormally large. And what it does is it sets up that over the course of the last, 40 years or so, this thing had grown to an enormous size, and it had become Godzilla-sized, and it was starting to attack some large industrial fishing boats. And that kind of perked the interest of what? What do you got to raise your hand for? What's the matter?
Was that the only egg that got irradiated?
We don't know. Supposedly, yes. It's the only one that survived the nuclear explosion.
Okay.
So anyway, it gets the attention of the U.S. Army. They start tracking this monster that's crashing its way through different islands and different areas and leaving trails of destruction, and they're tracking it, and they end up finding it back in New York City.
New York City.
So they get in touch with a nuclear scientist.
You're really dragging this on.
I don't know. I'm just trying. Nick Tatopoulos. He's a guy who studies.
Godzilla goes to New York to lay some eggs in Madison Square Garden because obviously Madison Square Garden is like a nest.
Yes,
because there's no other fucking basketball arenas anywhere else in the world. And
it's an island surrounded on all sides with water.
Alex's review of this
with an
movie is as
abundance-
long as the actual movie.
with an abundance
Yeah, you're
of
killing
hiding
me.
places.
You got to stop.
They get a guy who studies nuclear science and the effects on animals to come and figure out what the hell's going
No,
on.
Worms at Chernobyl.
He's a
Yes.
nuclear biologist,
The worm guy.
the worm guy.
And,
Baklava.
things ensue. Destruction ensues. And, and then, the French CIA or the French Secret Service come and try to clean up their mess because it's, technically their fault that this is all happening. And I think those are my favorite characters.
The French.
The French guys, the French Secret Service guys.
They're the guys who chew the gum to make him look more.
Yeah.
Makes us look more American.
Thank you very much. Elvis Presley movies. He was the king. I love it, man. And their little interactions with each other when they're in America and they're like in their little UPS truck and they're like, I thought you said this was French roast. Oui, senor. Oui, senor. Oui, monsieur, it's French roast. He's like, more cream.
We need a T-shirt that says "We Senor." We Senor.
I'm getting my languages confused.
No more Baileys for you.
Yeah, sorry. Oui, monsieur, French roast. And he's like, more cream. It's just
like, you call this a croissant?
yeah, we're no croissants. Yeah,
He said donut.
donut. Yeah. It's great. I love this movie. I think it's funny. I think it's fun. I think except for maybe a handful of parts, I think the
Except for like most of it is really fun.
the graphics still hold up today.
No, they don't.
Yeah, they do.
They
Wow.
do not.
When that initial attack happens and he's coming through the city and the mayor's got his little thing going on and all you see is like the leg come down and it's crashing through in between the buildings. I was like, dang, that still looks good.
Okay.
It still looks good
I'll
because
give
they
you
use
that
practical.
one.
They use practical stunts for a lot of that stuff. That's why it still holds up. The only parts that don't is the CGI parts, but they use those sparingly.
Or like the story.
What's wrong with the story? Tell me what is wrong with the story?
Where to begin?
Oh, here we go.
Go ahead. I'll try and defend.
I'm gonna go to the.
Yeah, you got
get a drink or
4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
Talk about how bad the story was.
It's not that bad.
Vader, you want to go to a bar?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go.
We'll be back. We'll be back in like 2 hours, you guys.
Kadish, what did you think about this movie?
I don't like this movie.
Oh, Kadish fell asleep twice
I did.
watching this.
I did. I had to
Like,
watch it.
I mean, we watched it and he slept through it, and then he tried to watch it again without me, and he slept through it again.
I slept through less of it the second time.
Good for
around.
you, babe.
I mean, that Madison Square Garden section where you have the mini Godzillas running around as like the Jurassic Park raptors.
So much fun.
Like, it just kills me every time. But
In a bad way, Alex.
This movie is actually quite interesting to me in the sense that there's so much surrounding it that makes it like educational, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Here we go. What happened behind the scenes?
And Kadish means it's interesting in the way that, like, when you're talking about a person you don't like and you can't think of anything nice to say about them, you say
it's-
they're interesting.
It's interesting, like a car accident. Like,
Yeah,
what
like
is
a- like a train
what's
wreck.
the physics of a car accident? How did this happen?
Exactly. Go ahead. Exactly.
You know Mike from Human
Resources.
Resources? Yeah, he's an interesting guy.
He's a character. Go ahead, Kadish.
So this movie, Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich were behind this movie, and it's kind of funny because last week we talked about Independence Day, and that's a classic. That's a fantastic movie, and they were kind of riding high off the success of Independence Day when they got tapped to do Godzilla. And I don't know if you guys remember the marketing campaign behind this movie, but it was ridiculous.
No.
Like they put out a teaser trailer like a year before the movie of like Godzilla's foot stepping through like the Museum of Natural History and like crushing a T-Rex skeleton.
Yeah, I do remember that.
And then they had that tagline that says "Size does matter," and everyone like flipped out over that. And leading up to the release of this movie, like it had so many different tie-ins, and like you couldn't go anywhere without seeing an ad for it. And it was just like the hype for this movie was so big, especially considering the fact that people like flipped out over Independence Day.
And this came out 2 years after Independence Day?
Yes, 2 years after
1998,
Independence Day. And so like the expectations for this movie were really big. And plus Godzilla was just like kind of like a household name. Like everyone knew who Godzilla was, and they were kind of excited to see like an American version of Godzilla.
Big expectations.
And then they actually saw the movie, and the movie was horrible. There's so many odd choices in this movie. Like first of all, Sony had been trying to get a Godzilla movie made for like I want to say like 10 years. And the company that kind of owns the rights to Godzilla in Japan is Toho Pictures. And so throughout the course of the development of the American version, like Toho basically had to get final approval on stuff. And they had a script that when Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin came on board, the second half of the script was basically Godzilla fighting a other huge monster called like a griffin or something like that. And Roland Emmerich, the director, he read the script and he's like, I don't get it. Why are we spending so much time with two monsters fighting? I don't find this interesting. I want the more human view of it. And of course, like someone who thinks that way just does not get Godzilla. Like he literally took out the big monster fight at the end of the movie because he didn't understand Godzilla or the fan base of Godzilla. And so Toho was kind of like, well, he made Independence Day, so maybe he knows something. And then they come with the creature design for Godzilla, and the creature designer for this was actually a guy named Totopoulos, who they named the main character of the movie after. And they came up with this like kind of quasi Godzilla like creature that we see in the movie.
It's the thin Godzilla.
I think that's probably my biggest bitch about this movie. Is it's not Godzilla.
So
it looks nothing like it.
Like the Toho guys had to approve of the Godzilla design, and they had certain guidelines where like, you had to have the spikes on the back, you had to have like, this and that. And when they saw the design, they were like, this is terrible.
Yeah.
They're like, this isn't Godzilla. And so like they basically said like, give us a day to think about this. And so like after they presented them, the new Godzilla design, the Toho guys got together and they were like, we've been trying to get this American version off the ground for like 10 years. Are we really going to get hung up over this design? And so the next day they basically said like, if we were to do any like small changes, it wouldn't matter because it's so radically different from what we want. Yeah. So they were like, instead of fighting it, we're just going to and sign off on it. So like they gave them, the Toho guys gave them their blessing and they went off to make the movie. And this movie is so weird because it's got like half the cast of The Simpsons in it. You have Harry Shearer, you have Hank Azaria, and you have a little cameo by Nancy Cartwright. And you have, it felt like Roland Emmerich wanted to work with certain actors. And so they just created parts so they could work with the people that they wanted to work with. Jean Reno, for instance, the main French guy. Mm-hmm. So like he was really big coming off the success of The Professional. Yeah, which
Natalie
was
Portman.
Yeah, which was Natalie Portman as a child, and Luc Besson's kind of like some would call it his masterpiece. Gary Oldman, bring me everyone, everyone.
Yeah. Great movie.
So like Roland Emmerich wanted to work with Jean Reno, and so like they had to figure out a way to get a French guy in there. He wanted to work with these comedic actors from The Simpsons. Originally, Matthew Broderick had been approached to be in Jeff Goldblum's character in Independence Day, and he had some type of
that
would have been radically.
That would have been interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Like he had commitments to Broadway at the time, so he had to turn down that role, but they still wanted to work with him. So when Godzilla came around, they went to Matthew Broderick and they're like, "Hey, are you free?" And he was like, "Yeah." So the weird thing about this movie is that I'd say the first fourth of this movie is actually really good. And that's where like they're kind of setting the stage for Godzilla, where there's this mystery of like, what are these big footprints? Like what's coming our way? And like, we never get to really see the monster head on. And then he makes like landfall in the city, and just the rampage starts.
I love that first scene when he comes and the guy's on the pier fishing. He's like, "I got a big one," and it's like this giant wave with the spikes coming out.
Yeah,
I love it.
it's very much Independence Day-esque in the sense that the first act of that movie is all kind of build up.
Yeah.
And so like this kind of followed the same thing where there's like this intriguing mystery, and you're building up to it. But the weird thing is like the tone of this movie is so radically off, because it's trying to take itself seriously as like a realistic, like what would happen if Godzilla came to New York. But then they use nothing but comedic actors in all these different roles, and the actors are not very good and they're not very funny. And
I laugh.
and it's weird because, like, for instance, the mayor of New York and his assistant
oh my God.
were basically caricatures of Gene Siskel and Robert Ebert, or Yeah, I think that's their names. Siskel and Ebert, basically, with the whole thumbs up, thumbs down thing. And it was just like a weird, like creative decision for Devlin and Emmerich to do that. And it's kind of funny because I watched the Roger Ebert and the Siskel and Ebert review of this movie, and they did not take this very well.
I gotta up my game.
Yeah.
I watched the Roger Ebert review on TV from. Do they have like
On YouTube.
Reruns of?
Yeah, they have
their old show.
They have
That's
segments of it
cool.
on YouTube.
That's pretty cool.
But they were kind of like bashing the movie, and then they were talking about, and this has nothing to do with the fact that we were lampooned in this movie. but it felt like the mayor character and his assistant Gene were just put in there just so they could make fun of Siskel and Ebert. So like, and then the
Did
worst.
they give Independence Day a bad review or something?
I don't remember. I don't think so.
Maybe they were just trying to give him a little jab.
They might have given Stargate a bad review or something like that.
Oh,
but
okay.
The worst part about this movie for me is just that. So you have scenes where Godzilla shows up and just starts running rampant through the city, and then he just disappears. And it's like you got like a 50-foot lizard that nobody knows where he went.
Bigger than 50 feet.
Yeah, it's
A couple hundred.
Okay, 500 feet.
There you go.
No,
And
it's not that tall.
and basically,
It like hugs the Chrysler.
This Godzilla is like a quarter of the size of what Godzilla is supposed to be.
Yeah, but he's
anyway,
slim.
giant lizard.
Mom, Dad, please don't fight.
So and they needed to make Godzilla go away so they could have moments where they could like kind of like progress the story along, because
Have some bad dialogue.
most Godzilla movies are just about this monster rampaging and the destruction around it, and and have bad dialogue and terrible character moments.
What, like what? Be specific.
Nice guys finish last, don't you know?
I love that New York couple. That I don't know. I grew up in the New
That's
England
my
area.
husband. I'm gonna kill him. Oh, look, you guys!
Get back here, you retard!
I got two accents.
I love that part.
Pretty much everything that Matthew Broderick says.
No,
Yeah, it's stupid.
no, it's not.
Oh yeah, you really hate Matthew Broderick in this movie.
Oh, terrible. I was like, I wish he would just be Ferris Bueller.
Yeah, I think that's what we all want. I think that's what we all want him to be, is just Ferris Bueller in every Matthew Broderick movie.
And then everybody would be like, well, then Matthew Broderick only plays Matthew Broderick in every movie, like how they do with Keanu
true.
Reeves.
That's true.
Like the best actor in this movie was Hank Azaria, but like
love him.
after he got stepped on, like he was just relegated to shouting stuff. Like that scene where he realizes he's still alive and he's just like laughing, like that was brilliant. But then like everything he does afterwards, like the characters never make you feel like there's anything dangerous or at stake here. Like every time they come face to face with the mini Godzillas, they're just like, oh, we should be filming this, instead of being like, we gotta get the fuck out of here. Like
It's very hijinksy.
Did they?
it was very hijinks.
It was very Scooby-Doo.
They made everybody leave the island, right?
No.
Well, they evacuated the city. Yes.
So I mean,
And
Okay.
and the weird thing is, like, the military is trying to keep Godzilla confined in New York, and it's like, why? You want to get him away from the city?
So they're trying to kill him.
Well, I know they're trying to kill him, but like they
So
were
if
like,
they can-
we gotta close down all the tunnels and stuff like that. It's like, wait, wouldn't you want the big monster to get away from the city into a more open space so you have an easier time of targeting him?
No, it would be harder to target him.
And like how
In open fields,
Open fields, where?
like to
He'd
the
be-
north of New York.
No, he'd be in the ocean. He'd just disappear. They'd have to track him down again. They know where he
they'll
is.
just shoot him with
Like
submarines. dude.
just
no
getting,
big deal.
Just getting him out of the city alone would have been their priority. Like realistically, because of all the destruction. But what kills me about this movie is that all the destruction is caused by the military trying to kill Godzilla, as opposed to Godzilla. Godzilla, like he steps through things, and it's kind of funny because sometimes he leaves like foot impressions in the concrete, and other times they're like, "Fuck it, we're not going to put it."
And his tail whips around and knocks
Yeah.
some windows out.
knock some windows out.
But
so.
like the Chrysler building got destroyed by
that was a great effect, though.
by the frickin'
That was good.
like military missiles and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And
because they were using heat seekers, but he's cold blooded because he's a lizard.
no, I get the idea, but
Set up and bail.
the whole point is that as a Godzilla movie, Godzilla should have been the one destroying stuff instead of the U.S. military. And it was funny because when I saw this in the theater, okay, I saw it on a base theater when my dad was kind of stationed in Massachusetts. And so...
That's why Matt's like, that would never happen.
Yeah.
well, I was watching it in the theater full of Air Force guys, pilots.
Oh man, I bet they were pissed.
And
They were.
and in the scene where Godzilla's chasing the helicopter through New York, every single pilot in that theater yelled "pull up" at the same time, because like he's like flying like through like the city streets, and he's like, I can't shake him, and they're just like, pull up, go up.
So I thought about that because you've said this to me before, and I thought about it while I was watching it, and I'm like, maybe, just maybe, if he pulled up, he would lose just too much airspeed to get away, and he would get chomped. Maybe that's what he was thinking. I don't know.
The weird thing about this is like Godzilla, as big of a monster as he is a ninja in this movie.
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah,
Like he just shows up out of nowhere.
Tunnels.
he's a burrower.
But I mean, like, you can't have a monster that big burrowing somewhere without knowing where he's burrowing, because he's going to leave a hole.
very true.
Well,
Remember when he comes up from beneath the street where Matthew Broderick sees him for the first time? It's like, yeah, you just follow those holes.
Well, there's so many of them. Once they go down there and look, and they're like, there's tunnels all over the city. We have no idea which one he's in, and they're looking for him actively. And they're going through the subways, and there's that one scene with the soldier, and he looks over, and he's got his flashlight up against the wall, and he doesn't see anything.
There are enough people in New York City where like you could track where this monster is just based off of like people reporting in like where they've seen it.
They're all gone. They evacuated the city once.
Yeah, and the fact that everyone's standing outside the city, like, let me in my apartment. I'm a New Yorker. I want to get back in there. And
Are
it's
you
like,
kidding me?
Yo, your apartment's gone.
I love the looters.
Go stay with your cousin in Jersey.
Hey, Eric, you know that really bad feeling I get when something really bad's going to happen? I'm getting that feeling right now.
Yeah,
That was great. I love the like hijinksy comedy in this movie. I think it's so like
I actually
One
think-
man's comedy is another man's garbage.
Yeah, that's what I think
true.
is actually like the worst part about this movie is like tonally it's so inconsistent. Like, does it want to be a comedy because it's filled with comedic actors and these like
Comedic moments.
kind of lighthearted moments?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like they're trying to make like a legit disaster movie, and it's hard to take it seriously.
Well, Independence Day had a lot of comedy to it.
Yeah, but it never undercut the threat of the aliens. It never undercut what was happening. Like the
And the thrill of the story.
yeah, the humor in Independence Day was kind of like the seasoning on a steak. Like it just made it better. This it like detracted from it because it just made the tone so inconsistent. Like you didn't know like it. The first fourth of this movie, the opening of the movie, felt very serious. Like the movie was taking itself very seriously, and then all of a sudden it just stops taking itself seriously.
I think you described it perfectly. It's very Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
It really is. Like when they start getting chased by the dinosaurs, by the Godzillas.
No,
or they
you had it right the first time.
It's dinosaurs.
The-
totally.
by
the Raptors.
By the mini raptors.
Mini
by
raptors.
the raptors with the really big jaws, the bad
it just-
underbites.
Baby
It did.
Zillas.
And it did feel like this movie was trying to be a Jurassic Park movie because I mean it came out off the success of the Lost World, and this was like their big dinosaur movie. But the biggest thing about this film, which I find interesting, is like it is the epitome of the Hollywood blockbuster idiocy that was at its peak in
For
the
sure.
90s. Like you had that Jimmy Page song with basically it was the Led Zeppelin song with Puff Daddy going over
Puff
the entire
Daddy
thing.
did a music video for this movie.
Yeah, and at the time, the '90s, like the big rap singles were like the thing that made tons of money. So they were like, oh, let's get a Led Zeppelin song and have Puff Daddy just grunt over the whole thing.
It makes me wonder, with the new Legendary movies, those are Godzilla movies.
Yeah,
Godzilla's 600
Huge.
feet tall.
Yeah.
He actually breathes fire or whatever radiation
Nuclear
breath
radiation.
and stuff, and
I did, yeah.
and they fuck up cities. I mean, those cities are done.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever living in those cities again.
Vader.
And
We
it's
saw
just-
King of the Monsters together in the
Oh,
theater.
I love the new Godzilla movies, man. The whole universe they're building is so much fun, But that's the exact opposite of what this movie is.
Yeah.
This movie, every decision they made was bad. It's just a bad movie, and it's just
If it wasn't in Godzilla, if it was like just named,
if it was Attack of the Giant Komodo Dragon, okay, then maybe it would have been a little bit better. At least you would have known what you were getting yourself into. There.
yeah.
But this was just a piece of shit. And I
disagree.
Yeah, like the real
it's so much
Godzilla
fun.
can't be hurt by
No.
bullets.
It's like those 4 missiles that they killed this one with at the end of the movie. He would have just flicked off with his
he would have
finger.
laughed.
Well, yeah, but I mean, this is like
That's not Godzilla.
This is a more realistic take on it.
Why?
Because he's an animal.
Why do you have to have a realistic
It's established
Godzilla?
throughout the movie that this is just an animal.
It's like, oh, we're Americans. We're going to take
that-
Godzilla and we're just going to screw it up. It's
Matthew
no good.
Broderick says in the movie, he's not a monster.
He's just an
He's
animal.
an
It's
animal.
the same theme as Jurassic Park.
Which is
But
a
that's
slap
not
in the
Godzilla.
face
That's not
of
Godzilla.
I know, I understand
Godzilla.
that, and that's why I don't defend this movie when it comes to like, well, it's not Godzilla. Like, no, I get it.
And
It's not.
and I felt like Godzilla kept changing size.
Yes,
I think he
I
does.
felt like in some scenes, like when he's walking past the news building, he's like 600 feet tall, and then when he's running across the bridge at the end, he's like 50.
Yeah, there's no consistency in the
It's
scale.
like they use different models and different scales and stuff. It's just like none of it made sense to me. And
Yeah, and this movie actually ruined the careers of Devlin and Emmerich for all intents and purposes. Like they never actually recovered from this, even though like the movie made like 300 million worldwide, which was considered a disappointment. But after this one, I think Devlin and Emmerich kind of went their own separate ways, and Emmerich made like other terrible disaster movies that haven't been good, and Devlin kind of got back into TV, and he's done some kind of like crappy like TNT shows and stuff.
I don't know. I enjoy this movie. I enjoy the humor that it has because I don't know, maybe because I like Scooby Doo too, but I don't
how
know.
dare you?
I thought it was funny.
What's your favorite part, Alex?
My favorite part of this movie, geez, I like O'Neill as a character.
What? He was the worst character.
He's so funny.
Which one is he?
He's the bumbling army sergeant.
army guy that keeps making mistakes, but is trying to like do the right
Oh
thing.
yeah, well at least okay.
My favorite part of the movie.
You
I think
identify with him, don't you?
the initial attack, just because I like the way that they filmed it with an actual like miniature city with a guy in a suit walking through, and like the destruction looks real. I think that still holds up. And I think the final chase scene where they're in the cab and Godzilla's
With the worst CG ever.
yeah, the worst CGI ever. When Godzilla's pissed that they just murdered all their babies, and he's like, "Wah!" He looks angry like that. That I don't know.
I'd rather watch the scene across the bridge from Escape from New York again. Nobody gets it.
It was a better scene in Escape from New York.
Yeah.
and they get inside of his mouth and they stick it with an electrical cord to get him to open his
He's got a cavity.
Vader, what's your favorite part of this movie?
I don't know.
Come on.
1-star shit fest. I don't have a favorite part of this movie. I really don't.
Nothing.
I looked at it after I'd been watching it, and I figured because it felt like 2 hours. And I go, oh, I've only been watching this turd for 45 minutes, and it's got another 2 hours to go.
Is it that long?
It's
like
2 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's super long for.
It blows by for me.
Way too
I don't
long.
even notice it.
Way too long. It seems longer than it is because it's bad, but also it's way too long for as bad as it is.
I also had a huge crush on Matthew Broderick's girlfriend in this movie, Audrey.
Maria Patillo.
She was cute.
Gorgeous. So
Her hair is my favorite part of this
I
movie.
love her hair.
Yeah.
Too bad she can't act.
She was fine. I love her.
She was not a classically trained actress.
little ditzy blonde moments. I love it.
She was a very cute girl.
There's really no parts of this movie that I can say was my favorite. I didn't like it.
Wow.
Kadish?
I'm
Pick
very,
one.
very close to Vader on this one.
Did you like the little nap that you got while you watched it? Is that your favorite part?
I actually think like pretty much everything with Jean Reno in this movie was my favorite part. Because I just
I love the gum chewing.
yeah the gum chewing was epic. But like just as an actor, Jean Reno is just fantastic.
He's great.
And the whole like kind of culture shock thing where like like they're French and sophisticated and they're just like, look at these American croissants.
Dumpy Americans.
Yeah, I thought you said this was French roast.
They don't know how to make coffee.
Oui, senor.
Oui, senor. That was my favorite part of the movie. Oui, senor.
T-shirt.
But, like the movie, it's not the worst movie I've ever seen, but it is so emblematic of like just everything that was wrong in Hollywood in the 90s. That, like this Hollywood blockbuster mentality that they had that kind of made movies stupid. And
Yeah, I remember being excited for this movie. I'm like, cool, we're finally going to get like a modern take on Godzilla movies. Because, before this, Godzilla movies were like the guy in the rubber suit from Japan. Those are fun, but, they're Godzilla movies. But I wanted to see a modern version of this like we have now.
What we got.
I wanted to see what we have now then. And I was angry when I left this movie. I'm like, what is this?
You weren't alone.
It was just a pile of crap, man. It was just...
It's like The Last Jedi of Godzilla movies.
Yeah, kind of.
I remember seeing this movie when it came out. I saw it on like DVD or VHS or something.
That's going to be the freaking thumbnail title. I can already tell.
The Last Jedi of Godzilla movies.
And I remember like being excited for a Godzilla film and just being like very bored through it. I think I ended up just like doing housework while it was playing.
It's a very boring movie.
It really is. It really is.
I'm in.
It's not exciting.
I'm in 100% from start to finish, guys.
But
it's not funny enough to be a comedy, and it's not exciting enough to be like a disaster event film.
I guess the best of both worlds.
I always try to understand where you're coming from because I feel like we're at odds a lot in what we like. So for me, I compare this movie to something like the movie Constantine, where with Keanu Reeves, where like the source material is very loose, and they just kind of made their own film out of it. So for, like that is like there are people who are like, oh, I get that it's like very loosely based on the content, but it's still a great movie. And then there are people who are like, this is garbage. So I feel like they're very comparable in that respect.
Yeah.
So I try to understand where your head is with this.
I make sure with any movie that I like that is generally seen as a bad movie, I don't blame people for not liking it. I get it. You guys all make completely valid points. I get it. I'm not going to try and be like, this movie's a masterpiece. You guys are all just jerks. Like, no, it's. I like it because it's fun.
Well,
I mean,
because we know why you like it. You like dinosaur movies.
I love dinosaur
and this
movies.
is a dinosaur movie.
You also do really
Godzilla.
take it personal when we don't like what you like, but you have no problem talking mad shit about anything
personal.
we like that you don't like.
But the thing is funny, you look around this table, we all like our own versions of bad movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's for real. I mean, there's a ton of terrible movies that I love. This just isn't one of them.
Well, I mean, name a perfect movie.
Empire Strikes Back?
Yeah.
Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, I could say that too. See, we all agree on what's
Raiders of
perfect.
the Lost Ark.
Raiders of the Lost Ark, yes. See, we all agree on what's perfect. We just disagree on what's bad. I happen to enjoy the heck out of this movie. I think it's a guilty pleasure is what I call it.
1 star shit fest.
One star shit fest.
1 star? Yeah.
One short crap fest.
Oui, senor.
That is going to be the new shirt. That's going to be great. I got to figure out what to put on it. Like I got to get a picture of his character with the army helmet on.
Well, you got to get a picture of Dracula, one of those mall robots.
Yes,
and Matthew Broderick. And is just going to say 1 star crap fest.
Not Godzilla.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Godzilla.
The skinny Godzilla,
or a picture like an iguana.
Yeah.
But you know what's funny about this movie is that the people at Toho and the people in Japan hated.
Well, they should.
With like 7
Oh,
passions.
yeah.
In fact, they even made a Godzilla movie where the real Godzilla fights this Godzilla and kicks its ass in like 10 seconds.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
Yeah.
I do. I want to see that.
I do too.
Next week, can we watch that movie and then also the documentary on Shopping Mall or
it was
Monster
just
Squad?
like Toho basically was like, you, Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich. This is what we think of your Godzilla.
That's completely justified. It should not have been named Godzilla. I'll give him at least that much. Like you should have just went with the generic monster movie, and I think it would have been
Attack of the Killer Iguana.
Yeah, something
spot
like
on.
something.
You should have at least had like a monster versus monster part in this movie if you wanted it to be a Godzilla film. Like the whole idea that we're going to focus on the human characters and not the giant lizard is mind-boggling to me.
Well, there has to be. And well, that's another discussion for another time. But I think
you've never seen a Godzilla film, obviously.
The old ones?
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen them.
Okay.
I'm not like sitting like taking notes while I'm watching it. But
So you know,
is
like
mean.
the human stories are just like, it's like whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
that's very much what the King of Monsters one was like. Like the humans were there, but it really you could just take it or leave
They're
it.
just following the big guys around.
Yeah, yeah. And I think wasn't that what the first one, the 2014 one, got criticized for because like.
Yeah,
They just dropped the whole plot line.
That movie doesn't get good until Breaking Bad guy kicks it. Really, as far as I'm concerned.
Really, I thought that the parts with Bryan Cranston were the best.
I
Parts
mean, don't get me wrong. I don't hate that movie. I mean, there's a lot of good part of that, but once they get to San Francisco, that's when it picks up. But I just like Carnage.
Like
the last half hour.
Yeah.
And the Vegas scene is killer. I love it when that thing walks through Vegas. But that's a different movie for a different review. So.
Yeah, we'll do good monster movies next time.
Yeah, it'd be fun.